Well, there are numerous challenges that manufacturers face at the moment. Demand for manufactured goods is recovering in the more mature Western markets such as Europe and North America, and growing pretty strongly in a number of emerging markets. So one of the things we're seeing is many manufacturers across different sectors pursuing a dual strategy, in effect, of consolidation in mature core markets and looking to take advantage of growth opportunities in emerging markets. And that plays out, and the locational challenges that go with it play out differently in different sectors. So in automotive, for example, we're seeing the growth of contract assembly or production of components or semi-finished products from plant then being exported for assembly to final product closer to the end consumer market. Saves on transport costs and sometimes on export duties, and increases the flexibility of production. In electronics, for example, high value goods being produced, so transport costs are a lower proportion of total production cost. And the imperative there is to retain access to the necessary pools of skilled labour without inflating transport costs too much. Well, for a long time, differences in production cost have been a major factor behind the location decisions of manufacturers, and particularly differences in labour costs. So, for example, we've seen the migration of quite a lot of manufacturing activity within Europe to lower cost locations in Central and Eastern Europe. Similarly, movement of manufacturing from the US to, for example, Mexico, and the growth of China for similar reasons. And clearly cost differentials still exist, but the landscape is changing. One reason for that is rapid growth in the consumer markets in a number of emerging countries, which has meant that wages have risen, and the advantage, or the labour cost advantage from relocation to certain economies has eroded and is starting to change. And we're seeing the consequences of that already. If we look at the pattern of cross-border manufacturing investment decisions in Europe over the past couple of years, it's very clear that isn't just a gravitation towards low-cost locations. The pattern is actually quite dispersed. A number have taken place in Western Europe, others on the western fringes of Central and Eastern Europe, where a balance can be struck between cost advantages on the one hand, and on the other hand access to larger and more affluent consumer markets in Western Europe. Another factor that clearly has a bearing here sometimes is incentives. It's often the case that incentives are available from the EU or from national governments or regional governments to locate in particular places. And we know that does have a bearing on the decisions of manufacturers from time to time. Well, there's quite a number of technical and technological innovations that are being adopted or actively considered by manufacturers across different sectors. And these have the scope not only to alter the cost base and the type of production processes that they pursue, but also their location decisions as well. So to pick a few, 3D printing, robotics, digitization of production, all of those things are new innovations that are being increasingly considered and taken up by manufacturers. And between them, they certainly have the scope to alter production processes towards more technology-dependent processes, perhaps less labour-intensive, but with certainly the potential to alter the locational footprint of the manufacturers. So we know, for example, in the sports clothing and sports equipment manufacturing sector, a number of the major companies there are revisiting and potentially reconfiguring their footprint to move towards a more research and technology-based platform, probably a denser network of facilities closer to the end point of consumption, i.e. the consumer markets, which also has advantages in terms of ease of integration with the retail function. Overall, I think what we're seeing is manufacturers revisiting the whole pattern of production costs, different factors of production, and looking again at the relationship between and the proximity between the location of production, of distribution, and of consumption of the final product, with the overriding objective of looking to assemble a more cohesive supply chain.